From the Gulf States Newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm senior criminal justice reporter Kat Stromquist, chopping it up this week. On today's show, with the Super Bowl over and Mardi Gras kicking in, New Orleans businesses want to know, will tourists keep showing up after the New Year's Day terror attack?
I don't think it's as dire as we felt it was going to be, but certainly the mood is not what it is.
And independent Mardi Gras crews are vital to the Crescent City, but are dealing with higher security costs.
These are regular New Orleanians. You know, they're school teachers. They might be retired.
That's all coming up on the Gulf States Gumbo. It's Mardi Gras, y'all. I'm here in New Orleans, where I'm looking forward to parade route chicken fingers and lots of costumed chaos. And in the Crescent City, we were set to have a big 2025. The city hosted the Super Bowl, and this Mardi Gras season is especially long. But the New Year's Day terrorist attack in the French Quarter has businesses worried. What will happen to the tourism that they rely on? Our economic mobility reporter, Stephan Bisaha, reports that for now, the tourists are still coming.
For most retail stores across the country, Christmas is king. It's the time when they sell the most stuff and make the most cash. The exception is New Orleans.
Mardi Gras is the bigger holiday, which is crazy, right?
Is it a close second or not even close?
I would say not even close.
Lauren Haydel is the owner of Flores Jr. It's a New Orleans t-shirt company that's grown to include 9 different stores across Louisiana and Mississippi. She says the hot item this year is pairing Taylor Swift with just about anything, really.
Taylor Swift, are you ready for it? And we have a king cake. I mean, you make Taylor Swift a part of Mardi Gras, and they've eaten it up this year.
How has traffic been during this first few weeks of the year?
I would say it's like it typically is. The French Quarter has been especially quiet.
The French Quarter is the big tourist spot in New Orleans, packed with bars, jazz, and Cajun cooking. It's also where a man drove a truck through a crowd on New Year's Day, killing 14 people.
That was 2 blocks from our store. Like 2 blocks. And Bourbon Street, like people out on celebrating the New Year. They weren't doing anything wrong.
Research shows that terrorism attacks do lead to a drop in tourism. But that question is always by how much, because it could vary a lot. The first major test for New Orleans was the Sugar Bowl. It was held the day after the attack and sent some mixed signals. On the rough side, it was the smallest crowd in Sugar Bowl history. On the other, 57,000 fans still attended, despite the fears and logistical pain from the game being delayed by a day. The second major test was whether or not people would still come to New Orleans or change their plans and avoid the city. Lauren Haydel says so far, the visitors have still showed up, at least to her store.
And one lady was like, of course I'm coming. I know how New Orleans is. Y'all are hosts. Like, you're going to welcome us no matter what. And it was like, yes, thank you. You know, we want you to still keep your trip.
New Orleans has historically been the place for a good time, legal or not. One new business in the French Quarter is the Storyville Museum, honoring the city's former red light district. Klaus Sadlier owns the museum and documents the city's many vices, from prostitution to gambling.
Poker was invented in the city.
Poker was invented in New Orleans?
Poker was invented in New Orleans. It was a French game called Pourquoi.
So you're really making sure New Orleans gets credit for all the good sins.
All the good sins, right? Then we have a section here of peep show machines, which I think
Sadlier says his new museum is still growing, despite the worries after the attack. In fact, he had his second busiest weekend up to that point in January.
I don't think it's as dire as we felt it was going to be, but certainly the mood is not what it is.
He says if there's a lesson to take from Storyville at this moment, it's that New Orleans has always been a place where visitors and residents come together no matter the circumstances.
It's a city that rallies around its people and has a good time. It doesn't take things too seriously.
But I mean, I agree with you about...
Ellie Rand does public relations for the French Quarter Management District. She says people outside New Orleans have also been rallying around the city.
I know 30 people every year that come in from out of town. No one's canceled their trip.
No, nobody's canceled.
No one's canceled.
Now, there may have been some cancellations for the Super Bowl. About 65,000 seats were filled, about 10,000 shy of capacity. But the city's still selling it as a success. Moving on, test number 3 is whether or not conventions are staying the course.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
Walt Leger is the CEO of New Orleans & Company, which represents the city's tourism industry. He was about to head into an event for the National Auto Dealers Association. 22,000 visitors were there just a couple weeks after the attack. The J says conventions like this one are sticking with New Orleans.
No events have been canceled. No meetings have been canceled. What our hotel community is telling me is that they actually have better attendance than they had projected.
Lauren Haydell is happy that cancellation seemed to be a non-factor. But her bigger concern is about what happens after Mardi Gras. And that is the fourth test. Will people make new plans to come to New Orleans?
The people that are visiting now probably had their plans booked before it happened. Pretty soon we're going to be looking at people who are choosing to come here after this happened and making their flights and travel arrangements after the fact. Will they still do that? I don't know. I hope so. And if you're listening, please still come because we're ready to show you a good time.
One way tourism industries bounce back after an attack is by demonstrating that it's still a safe place to visit. The New Orleans police say by that standard, Super Bowl weekend went better than expected, though 2 people were injured in the stabbing in the French Quarter. For the Gulf States Newsroom, I'm Stephan Bisaha.
The Gulf States Newsroom is a team of journalists working with NPR and local public media stations in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana to cover the issues that matter to you. Email us, connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org.
You're listening to the Gulf States Gumbo. I'm Kat Stromquist. Stephan Bisaha first spoke with Flirty Girl's Lauren Haydell in January, and they've been keeping up since then. He called her up earlier this week to check back in, now that we're deep in Mardi Gras season.
How has business been going as far as just foot traffic and people coming in to buy things?
We have not seen a difference. So it's just been Mardi Gras business as usual for us here in New Orleans. It has not affected us one bit. The economy has definitely affected, because things are more expensive than they used to be. So people might not be able to afford buying a pair of earrings along with their Mardi Gras t-shirt or a headband with their Mardi Gras t-shirt. So our units per transaction have gone down. So we can see that they're not getting all the things that they used to.
Haydell says there's another reason Mardi Gras is different this year.
I didn't really realize the difference that the New Year's Day events would have on Mardi Gras until parades started rolling on St. Charles Avenue. There are barriers on the streets. There are concrete barriers lining the neutral ground so that what happened on Bourbon Street can't happen on the parade route.
And about that security. In New Orleans, we're known for parades, with masked revelers throwing beads from floats. But because of the New Year's Day attack on Bourbon Street, the city is requiring more police officers, which means higher costs. Our public health reporter Drew Hawkins reports on how smaller independent parades are vital in the Crescent City, and how these costs affect them.
Greetings from the intergalactic crew of Chewbacca's, a sci-fi and fantasy-themed Mardi Gras crew made up of more than 120 sub-crews, small groups ranging in size from half a dozen to hundreds of members, each with their own theme.
We are Crew Shall Not Pass. We are the Lord of the Rings walking crew for Chewbacca's, and this is our 2nd year running.
It's the week before Parade Day, and they're gathering to hang out and exchange throws. These are small, handmade items unique to each sub-crew, like painted wands for Mischief Managed, a Harry Potter crew, or decorated forks for the Twilight-themed crew of Twihards, which member Kayla Mendo explains.
As an homage to the city of Forks, which is the setting of Twilight.
Mardi Gras doesn't just happen on Mardi Gras Day. Crew members get together throughout the year, meeting up to craft throws, work on their costumes, and their dance routines. Chewbacca's Captain Simonette Berry, or her official title,
Overlord Apocalypse Meow,
says that sense of community is a huge part of Carnival, and it's more important than ever.
We can't let things like the Bourbon Street attack stop the joy that we find in each other and in the culture of parading and celebration.
Because of the attack, New Orleans is requiring parades to have more police officers to provide security. The city covers these costs for larger, more traditional parades. But for independent walking crews, costs can typically reach up to tens of thousands of dollars. and they have to pay for it themselves.
These are regular New Orleanians. They're school teachers. They might be retired.
Yvonne Garrett is captain of Krewe de Vue, another walking parade.
We are very well known for, let's just say, our sophomoric humor.
Garrett says the independent crews also make a ton of money for New Orleans. An economic impact study done by the University of New Orleans last year found that Krewe de Vue alone generated almost $2 million for the city. New Orleans City Council President J.P. Morrell says that's why these parades should be supported by the city.
I mean, if you talk to the businesses along a Chewbacca's or Krewe de Vue route, they'll say those walking troops do not go along traditional Mardi Gras routes. So for some of those businesses, they literally count on that infusion of people for the year.
Morrell's office is working to change the city's code so that parades that cause a certain economic impact can have their security costs covered, so they can continue and more residents can join in on the fun, which is actually how Mardi Gras originally started. Vatican Loki, a.k.a. Professor Carl Naval, is a Mardi Gras historian who has been covering parades for almost 30 years for local TV. He says the very first crews had similar beginnings back in the 1800s.
It was only a few people. They had maybe one float. They had to borrow their costumes from a touring Shakespearean company just to be able to make the procession and the ball for that evening. But they started the same way as many of the marching crews today started. A lot of people getting together and deciding, let's put on a parade and be part of the carnival heritage.
Just days before their parade, Chewbacca's got the security bill. Almost $45,000, more than twice what they normally pay. The crew was worried about whether they'd be able to afford it and having to raise the price for membership, which could make it harder for people to participate in Mardi Gras. Luckily, the city stepped up to cover the extra cost so the parade could roll as planned. It's a temporary solution for this year. But they'll have to come up with a long-term solution to pay for security. So in future Mardi Gras, people can stay safe and laissez le bon temps rouler. For the Gulf States Newsroom, I'm Drew Hawkins.
And now it's time for Gulf States Gems, a series that shines a light on some of the treasures of the region. Here's Drew Hawkins again talking to Mardi Gras historian Carl Naval about the city's best-known celebration.
Why is New Orleans Mardi Gras a Gulf States gem?
Because there is nothing else like New Orleans Mardi Gras anywhere in the Deep South or anywhere else in the world. New Orleans and Mardi Gras is a heartfelt experience. It's something that speaks to our souls. It speaks to our very lives. Carnival and Mardi Gras is more than just a celebration. It's a culture and a tradition that every New Orleanian carries with them, whether they were born here or not. It transcends time, it transcends space, and it transcends barriers. Carnival and Mardi Gras will always be special in New Orleans, and more so than anywhere else in the world.
You can see pictures of Gulf States Gems from across the region on our Instagram. And we want to hear about a place that you consider a gem. Send us your suggestion. Email connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org. This week's show was hosted by me, Kat Stromquist, and is cooked up by the Gulf States Newsroom team. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations, WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your roux.